right, girl gang. So today we are breaking down the menstrual cycle. So I want to really kind of just set the stage for this. The menstrual cycle is a very complex hormonal and physical interaction that happens monthly for most women. And this is something that really is a lot dependent on many factors in the body and in the brain. So I'm gonna just really do a basic overview with you guys, and we're gonna break this down so that you understand what a normal period should be like and what drives a normal period. And that way, later on, when we get into like how you can mess the period up and how we get into menstrual problems, you'll have kind of a basic understanding. So today's video is just about the normal menstrual cycle. So the thing that we want to first set the tone with is the players. So your monthly episode is played out by hormones, by the ovaries, the uterus, and of course the vagina is a really important player as well. So the first thing I want to start with is hormones. And so hormones are actually what drive us to go through puberty and to begin having menstrual cycles, to develop breasts, underarm hair, and pubic hair. So one thing that a lot of people kind of always worry about is whether or not their hormones are normal. If you're having normal monthly periods, chances are that your hormone balance is normal in terms of your estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. Those are kind of the three major hormones that our ovaries produce. So if you're having regular monthly cycles, the likelihood of your hormones being normal is pretty good. So in terms of hormones, just like I mentioned, our main hormones are estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. Now, you might recognize the word testosterone for being a male hormone, but women also produce a small amount of testosterone too. It kind of gives us like our aggression, gives us our I don't know, but we produce a small amount of testosterone, and that's very normal. Certainly men produce a lot more of it, but I wanted you guys to know those major hormone players so that you can kind of follow through this scenario. So I'm going to tell you the story of how the hormones that are produced by the ovaries affect the uterus, and that's basically kind of how the menstrual cycle plays out. So first thing, let's start with the ovaries. The ovaries are where all of your immature eggs are held, and so before you're even born, like in your mom's tummy, you have all of these like primary follicles or like immature eggs that are stored in your ovaries. And as a matter of fact, by the time we're born, we still have tens of thousands of these eggs that are there. And so usually one of those follicles is going to start maturing each month, and that's from work of hormones. And so the hormones help mature the egg in the ovary. The egg actually develops inside a cyst. So, at any given time of the month, a woman might have an actual cyst on her ovary, and it's totally normal. So a lot of women come in actually asking about, a cyst that was found when they had a CT scan or like an ultrasound, and they're like really freaked out, like, oh my God, I have a cyst on my ovary. But actually every month you make a cyst if you are ovulating. So it's actually very normal to have a small cyst on your ovary. And so that's where that egg is developing. It's not normal to have a big cyst on your ovaries or weird looking cysts on your ovaries that we can see on ultrasound, but a normal 2 to 3 centimeter cyst is actually going to be where the egg is developing. So that egg is going to be nurtured and grow up inside of that cyst. And when the time is right, the cyst is going to burst and release that egg. So when the egg is released, you can see that the fallopian tubes conveniently have like these little finger-like projections called fimbria that are going to actually kind of help scoop up that egg. And the fallopian tube will allow the egg to travel down the canal into the space called the ampulla. And that's the most common place where the egg and the sperm meet up. So the ampulla is like in the mid portion of the tube. So now The egg is ready. Let's talk about what's been happening while the egg's been growing up. Because like, you know how you see these movies, they have this backstory and they cut to the backstory so you can see like what was happening in another part of the country while something was happening in another part of the country. So anyway, so the ovaries were maturing their egg and the egg was being made ready to be released or ovulated. Meanwhile, back at the uterus is building up a thick, fluffy lining inside because it knows that the egg is growing up and it's going to be ready just in case that egg gets fertilized by a sperm and wants to land in the uterus and implant as a pregnancy. So we don't want our newly formed embryo to fall onto like a hard surface. We want a soft, pillowy cushion. So the uterus is developing this soft, pillowy lining called the endometrium. So now that the endometrium is nice and pillowy, soft and thick, and the egg has been released by the ovary, we are just waiting for the magic to happen. So when a woman has sexual intercourse and sperm is released into the vagina, it actually has to swim through the cervix, it has to swim up through the uterus and out to the fallopian tube where that egg is patiently waiting inside of usually the ampulla portion of the tube. So the sperm gets to the egg and actually fertilizes it, and then that becomes a new human being. It actually becomes a new embryo. And so once the fertilized egg or embryo has traveled down through the tubes, it's going to land in the uterus and kind of bury itself in this soft, pillowy cushion called the endometrium. And that's, the cushion that the uterus has been making while the ovary is maturing the egg. So let's say you don't have sexual intercourse and you don't have an embryo that needs to implant in that soft, pillowy lining of the uterus. Well, that lining sheds off. So once the egg has kind of gotten rotten, or maybe it's fully fried, I don't know what it does. But anywho, the egg falls down into the uterus because it hasn't been fertilized, and the egg and the lining of the uterus are shed off. So let me just put it in perspective for you. An egg is like teeny weeny tiny, like you probably couldn't even see it with your naked eye. As a matter of fact, I know you couldn't see it with your naked eye. So don't think about, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have like egg yolk coming out of my vagina. That's not it at all. So the egg is teeny tiny. But once that soft pillowy lining begins to shed off, you're gonna actually see bleeding, and that's your period. So the first day that you see bleeding is actually day 1 of the menstrual cycle. This is the point at which your hormones are their lowest. And so your cycle is basically starting to build back up again. So once you have released that lining that you built up last month, your period has ended, the lining starts to slowly grow back again while the ovary is maturing a new egg. And normally you'll see women ovulate from alternating sides. So an egg will be released from the left 1 month, and then an egg will be released from the right the next month. It just kind of gives the other ovary time to clean up that cyst and make sure the ovary is back to good working order. And so you'll see the ovaries kind of, I'll give an egg, you give an egg, like that. But the uterine lining should always build up and be prepared just in case that egg gets fertilized and a pregnancy needs to occur. So you can see how there are lots of little steps that kind of have to work just right for you to have a monthly, just like clockwork menstrual cycle. So there are lots of points at which this could go wrong. So women who have abnormal bleeding can have abnormal bleeding for all sorts of reasons. There are also women who aren't bleeding as much as they should be. And so those are all things that can happen at different points in this cycle. So isn't that amazing? That our bodies can do that an embryo actually forms through the egg and the sperm uniting. So you can see how it seems like it's really hard for that sperm to actually reach the egg, and then they've got to actually dig in. So there's all these pitfalls along the way. The vagina is usually acidic, and so the sperm can be killed by the acid in the vagina. Then you've got the cervix, and they've got to get through the cervical mucus. And then you've got to they've got to swim all the way up the uterus, and they got to pick which fallopian tube actually is holding the egg. So it's kind of like, 50-50 if I'm going to take door 1 or door 2. So once they actually reach the egg, they're all kind of trying to attack it, but only one is usually going to get through. There are a few scenarios where more than one gets through, but those are pretty rare. And so our bodies do some really amazing things. And so understanding the menstrual cycle also helps you understand on what days of the month you're fertile. So we said earlier that the first day of bleeding is actually the first day of your menstrual cycle. The majority of women are going to ovulate on days 14 or 15 of their menstrual cycle. So if you know what day 1 is, then you can count out to day 14, right? I mean, I'm not that great with numbers, but hey, I can count to 14. So if you can count out to day 14 or 15, then that's usually when the egg is going to be patiently waiting inside the tube to be fertilized. So that might be a time to avoid sexual intercourse if you're not ready to become pregnant. If you are ready to become pregnant, that's the time to get it in. So I always tell my patients days 13 through 17 are the time to go at it. So sex every day, days 13 through 17, if you really want to have the most chances to have that egg be fertilized and become an embryo so it can fall down into that soft, cushiony lining inside the uterus. So, girl gang, I hope you understand the basics, bare bones basics of normal menstrual cycles. So now you can kind of understand where things can get screwed up. And of course, I'm going to be bringing you content and talking about different reasons why we can have abnormal uterine bleeding or abnormal periods. And I'll be bringing that to you in future videos. If you have a question, a comment, or you have a topic that you really want me to discuss, I will be happy to oblige you. Make sure that you comment below, question below, and that you also like, share, and subscribe. Dr. Joy, signing off. Peace.
See you soon, girl gang. Don't forget to subscribe and comment below.